Unmuting my mic. There we go. Hey, everybody. It's Kate Richburg, and welcome to this pre-recorded version of Beadshop Live. It's a special one. All day, I've been broadcasting into a whole myriad of social media channels in celebration of the Great Bead Extravaganza Takeover Day for me and for Beadshop.com. So today, we're going to get right to it. We've done a series of bead shop basics. If you've been watching all of this month, we've been issuing a bunch of pre-recorded bead shop basics, which have been a lot of fun. So today we are going to tackle the infinity stitch. So without further ado, let's see what we've got going on here. I am going to spotlight this screen and let's take a look at what I'm going to be using. So if you remember our last broadcast, we did regular laddering stitch, which means that we used a single piece of thread that started in the center, used the two tails to ladder our beads on. This infinity stitch is a little different. Now, I use infinity, gosh, I would say about 75% of the time that I ladder. And you can see here in this section of ladder bracelet, you can see kind of that doubled over strand of the infinity. I'm going to share with you some of the different materials you can use for that infinity stitch. Some people, the infinity stitch eludes them. So my goal today is just to give you kind of a bunch of ideas and techniques on how to use it. So, and for making ladder bracelets or, any other type of laddering that you are working on. So I've got in front of me some basic items that I want to share with you. I've got some leather attached to my tray. I'm going to use both this 2mm here and this 1.5mm to show you some different things. I've got some different threads that are all appropriate for infinity stitch, though you might think they're not. It's not a usual thing to infinity. Infinity, we think of using skinny thread like this KO. But I'm also going to examine 0.4mm Chinese knotting cord, wax linen, some 0.5mm leather, some micro Ceylon, and some fine Ceylon. Okay, and all that means these different threads, I'm going to put them to the side so I've got a little bit more room here. All that means is, you guys, that you need to match the thread to the beads that you're using. Okay, I've got a variety of beads here. I've got some Matubos, or what we call a 2/0. I've got an 8/0 bead. I've got an 11/0. I have a bugle bead. You can also use things that have larger holes. I'm going to grab a few of these metal regular shadow beads that we like. You can use 6/0, 6/0 seed beads, whatever you want to ladder with is fine with me. You just need to match the thread that you're laddering or infinity stitching with to the bead that you're using. And so that's what we're going to take a look at now. Let me start with something that might be a little more unconventional. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of this 1.5mm and we're going to go with this 2mm here. And we're going to take a look at that. And I'm going to start with these Matubos. Let's look at something that has a large hole. All right. The thing, you guys, that you want to remember, infinity stitch is like a figure 8, right? You're making an infinity or a figure 8. So you're going over and under and over and under, okay? You're not making circles, right? We're making an infinity symbol, hence the title. Okay, so all I'm going to do to start is I'm going to grab this 0.5mm leather, though it could also be wax linen would work with this size bead as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I've connected it to my board here, and I'm just going to come in and create a quick, I actually want the long side on this side. Well, it doesn't make any difference. All I need to do is finish it on the correct side, because when I infinity stitch, I stitch from my left going to my right. Okay, so you can connect this with a crimp, like one of our evolve crimps, whatever you want to do it. You could have a button up here, however you're going to start your bracelet. But I'm going to pull down, this is maybe about 5 or 6 inches of this cord, the 0.5 millimeter. I'm also going to tighten my cords on the other side of my board. Can you see that there? So I have kind of a nice taut cord here. And I'm just going to connect it using a quick bit of macrame. And that's how I'm going to start it. You'll see me, maybe I'll start another one where I just tie the threads in the knot, a beginning knot. You can also silk wrap this. In our Beadshop Basics series, and the best place to find that is over on our YouTube channel. You can also go right to beadshop.com and check out all of our basics under our Learning tab, and you'll see how to do this flat macrame. I want to start this with this long strand over on the left, so I'm going to tie one more flat knot like that. This, what I'll do is I'll come in later and I'll glue this down or whatever, but I'm not too worried about this closure right here, or this end piece here. I'll deal with that later. So now I'm going to open up this section here just a little bit, widen up the space between my cords, and I'm going to do that by just simply clamping. You can see that right there, how I just clamped those two down. Now this cord here is very secure, right? And I've got a long piece here. This is maybe a little less than a yard. What I would do, if you're not super familiar with all of the techniques you're going to be using in your piece, you may just want to go ahead and do a little practice section like I'm doing right here, just to get yourself familiar. So this 2/0, this Matubo, you can see it has a pretty big hole inside, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to nestle that bead kind of in between my cords. Again, this is a 2 millimeter. And I'm going to come in with my thread from my right, going over this left hand cord, popping it underneath the left hand, and then it'll tighten up and it'll sit in the right space. Okay, just like that. Okay, now you can see here, let me get this a little lower so you can see. There we go. Now what I'm going to do, my cord has come from underneath my right hand cord, or my right hand base cord. So now I go back through the bead, over the top, and I'm able to use this leather, you guys, because the cord, the hole in this bead is so large. Now before I pull through too much, I'm just going to dip that cord underneath the left hand base cord here, and then tighten it up. Okay, so you can see there's my first infinity with just using this single 0.5 millimeter and the infinity stitch. So see here, my cord is coming out from underneath my left hand. So now I'm going over the left hand cord, through the bead hole, and under the right hand cord, and tighten. Now I'll reverse it back by going over the right hand, pull it through just a bit, and then dip that edge of that, or that end of that cord, underneath the left I kind of hang on to that bead to hold it in place and then pull everything tight. You can see, and it's really kind of obvious when you're using a cord that's this large, as I'm laddering, you can see that the left-hand side of the stitch kind of angles up and away a little bit, and the right-hand side of this stitch around the cord kind of sits kind of straight here. And that's just kind of the nature of the stitch, because you're dropping your thread down from this bead to the next bead in line. And I find this to be pretty attractive with these larger beads. I love the Matubos, the 2/0 Matubos, but you could use any of our really large hole beads like this. You just need to, oops, sorry about that. You just need to test to see which beads would work with this, right? You need to make sure that your thread is going to go through coming from the left and turning around and going back through the right. Okay, so there's that. Now this technique, or this size beads, they would work with the Irish wax linen, the 4-ply here, as well as this 4mm Chinese knotting cord. Both of those would work out just fine with this technique here. Okay, now let me connect another piece of cord here. Let me cut a bit off, and we're going to examine a couple of other threads for infinity stitching. Okay, and these are all pieces without a needle, right? We're not using a needle for these. So for this one here, I would have put my button or whatever it is I'm connecting. And let's say that I'm going to infinity stitch using micro Ceylon. So let me roll off a piece of that. And let me cut off a piece here. And what I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to make a needle on the end of this thread. Okay, so this micro, and you've seen me do this, but I'm going to do it just real quick for you. And we have a basic video on this about how to make glue and needles, but I put just a touch of that zap glue on that baggie, like so. Then I fold this over, this baggie over the cord itself, and I want a nice long end here because I want to be able, if my thread gets a little, the tip gets a little frayed or whatever, I want to be able to clip it. And I'm going to pass this through, actually, if I don't get glue all over my hands. I want to pass this through a couple of times because I really, really want to stiffen this thread. Okay, and then I grab onto that baggie and pull this through and kind of squeegee the end there, so I've taken off the excess glue. Now I'm going to set that aside, or that end aside, hoping that it doesn't glue to anything. And I'm going to attach this end, this time with a silk wrap. So can you see here, I'm going to lay all of this together like so. And I'm going to silk wrap using another length of Ceylon. This is fine Ceylon right here. So let me cut a little length. We've got basics on how to do this silk wrap, but essentially it's a great way to cinch, multiple cords together. So I'm going to lay that end in, lay this loop on that I'm silk wrapping, and I'm going to come in and just wrap towards that loop. And you've seen me do this before. And again, if you haven't, check out that basics, that Beadshop basics on silk wrapping that I just did not that long ago. And it'll give you a good basic knowledge of how to do this silk wrap here. So I'm going to come in, pull that end through that loop, and then pull the other side. Sorry, there's a lot of frame there. And tighten it tighten it down like so. Okay, so we've got that nice wrap. It's like wire wrapping, but with thread. Okay, so now I can come in and clip or thread burn, but I want to make sure that I'm only clipping away the threads that I want to omit. And then this is pretty tight underneath here. You can also add just a little drop of glue underneath there, but I'm just going to go ahead and clip that away. So now this is ready. And I've got my thread ready to infinity. And I've got this length is now nice and stiff here. And to really help it along, I'm going to just angle cut it just a little bit. So let's go ahead and take our friend with the 2 millimeter and the matubos off, and let's connect this one to the board right here. I'm going to connect it kind of in the same way by putting those two little clamps down there at the end. Now here with this, you guys, since I've got such a thinner thread here, but with a stiffer end, this is a great way to use 8/0 with infinity stitch. So I'm going to just use one to start. See if I can get it in there. There we go. And just like I did with that leather, I'm going to come in, place that in. Oops, I want it to go over the top here. There we go. And I want it to go under the left-hand side, like so. It's getting caught on my snips. Let me get those out of the way. And then I'm going to come back and go through that 8/0. There we go. And then dip the end of that thread underneath the left-hand side. The first one always gives you just a little bit of sass, but you can see that's right there. It's kind of hard to see the contrast of those threads, so let me get a little closer for you. But I assure you, there you go. That's a little bit easier to see. Now, if you're tapering up, let's say that's 1, I can go to 2 right here, 1 and 2. And I'll slide those in. And I'll get my end of my cord that is stiffened with the glue. And I'll just push the beads up from the back to open up that little bead hole tunnel. Put that end through, pop it underneath that left-hand side, and pull everything through. So there you go. It's kind of nice, this needleless infinity, where I'm just doing this single strand of the Ceylon. This again is the micro, but if you're using, let's say, size 6 seed beads, you could definitely pop up to the fine. It would be large enough. Those holes would definitely be large enough. It just takes a little bit of planning so you can decide what stringing material best matches your bead holes. And obviously you want to aim for the thread that's going to fit through your smallest hole. Now let's take a look here at using some skinnier thread, some KO, with a needle, if we wanted to add a needle onto this. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and undo this, put this aside, and let's get another piece of leather. And I'm going to get my KO, and this time I'm going to double my KO through. And you can see, like I showed you at the onset here, this piece of laddering, can you see how the KO, now you can really see it. that the KO is doubled here. All right, so it has a little bit of a different look. So what I do, I'm going to use a beading needle. You could use a Sharps or a regular size 10 or whatever size beading needle you need to use. I'll go ahead and I'll reel off some of my thread here, and I'll clip it away, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to wax the very tip of this thread like so. That'll help me go ahead and string this thread through the needle. And we do as our friend Emily tells us, to needle the thread by placing the eye of the needle on the thread rather than pushing the thread through the eye of the needle. And now once that needle has been threaded, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wax these two as I hold them together. Okay, and that'll keep these threads kind of together, these doubled over threads, acting as one single thread. Okay, and then if I want to, I can run it through my fingers to try and remove any extra wax that's on there, but it's not too bad. Now, this is the last way I can attach. I'd have my button or whatever it is on here, and I just put my thread along my leather, and I'd make a loop, and I would tie an overhand knot, if I can get it off my finger. I'd tie an overhand knot, capturing that KO in the knot, like so. Okay. And you'll just walk this knot up as close as we want it to be. I'm leaving kind of a large loop because I don't need to fuss with it. This is just kind of a little sample. But you can also kind of tighten that KO a little bit. And you want to make sure that that KO is hiding right inside that knot, like so. So let's go ahead and clamp it on. And I can come in, I could add a little bit of glue here if I wanted. I'm not going to worry about that end right now, again, since it's just a little sample. And I'm going to go ahead and clip these ends with my clampers right here. So now I can use beads that are pretty small, right? Because I've got a needle on the end. So I can start with my 11/aughts, all right? And so I'm just going to start with one. This is a 1.5 millimeter, but 11/aughts also look really nice with 1 millimeter leather. So I'm just going to slide it through like we've done before. Kind of tell that bead that you're the boss and slide it up and tighten it in. There we go. Let me get a little tighter in with this shot so you can see. There we are. Now I've come underneath that right hand, so I'm going to take the needle and go back over the right through that seed bead, trying not to nick the leather or split the threads that are going through the bead hole already. Tighten it up, open this up a little bit. There we go. And of course we need to pop this needle underneath. There we go. And tighten. So let's go ahead and taper up and do 2 seed beads this time. So I've got my 11/aughts. There we go. And I automatically dip that thread under the right hand side of the leather. I bring my needle over the top, and then I can just automatically dip it under the left hand side. So it's making that infinity shape, and push them up together. And again, you can see how one side kind of comes up a bit, and how the left side, angles up a bit and how the right side is a little straighter across. But again, that's just kind of the nature of how this stitch is. So I'll come through underneath the left, then up and, underneath the right, then up and over, dip that needle underneath. If it doesn't want to dip, like mine isn't wanting to, pull it through and then dip it under like that. Tighten it up. I hold my fingers there to kind of hold it in place, and then tighten. Okay, and you can continue on until the piece is wide enough and then continue on like this. You can also use bugles. I've got some bugle beads here. Let's see if these are about the same length. A little bit smaller than those 3 seed beads. But laddering with bugles, I think, is kind of a fun and sometimes unexpected addition to your designs. You can see I've got these longer ones here, and I've done this same infinity using 8/0 checkmates tiles and bugles. So it really just depends on what you are liking in your patterns. Let me put on one more bugle here, like so, and then we bring it back and we go underneath. Whoops, we don't want to split that thread. There we go. And tighten. Sometimes I have to pull the loop on the right, tighten everything up as I pull the needle on the left. So that's it, really. Okay, now to change threads, let's say that I was running out of thread, I would just go back in like I would with any seed bead stitch, and I'd bring this back through. Though with these bugles, it's a little difficult, so I would probably end up maybe with some 11/0, because you can see here, if I bring this thread, this needle back through these 11s, I can still get it through. And I would just weave it back up, just a few rows, and then I'd thread a new piece of thread and weave it back down and start again. Okay, so it's pretty simple to do, no glue needed. It's just kind of like a weaving thing there. So however you do it, you guys, what you want to think about is the beads that you're using. What size, are they larger, medium size, or small beads? What materials do you want to use, for the outcome of your piece? Do you want it to have a little more of this has those larger matubos, which look great, or things like this 8/0, right? I have another couple of samples, or at least this sample here that I have infinity stitched. This is one of the pieces that we did where we clamped in 2 extra strands, and then we just did the over and under, kind of like almost an off loom weaving, but you can see that there are 4 strands there. But however you want to utilize this infinity stitch, I think it is a great one, especially if you like using a needle. It goes very, very fast. I think it looks great. I also love it kind of this little more of not a rugged look, but a little more kind of a fun, natural look using all leather. And the way that I would do this, I would make sure to use enough so you don't have to add any cord. And then I would just finish it off by doing some macrame on the end here. So that's it. I hope you liked this primer on the infinity stitch, and it gave you some great ideas. You can find all of our Beadshop Basic series. Great place to find it is right over on our YouTube channel. You can find a bunch of quick basic tutorials to help you through all of your jewelry making needs. And don't forget to join us over on all of our social media on beadshop.com, as well as shop for all of your supplies right here on Beadshop. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining me, and I'll see you next time.